my name is Adipat Virdi and I'm an interactive producer. So I work and talk around the world about all things interactive, multi-platform, transmedia. And I also work on my own projects looking at how we can use interactive thinking to create real-world social change. Sure. So interactive media, at the moment the film industry is going through a bit of a change. There's this whole thing that because of digital media, because of new social platforms, audiences are changing in the way they consume content. So they have more power because they've got more control over how, when and why they consume content. But also there's another shift, which is that they're becoming even more interested in becoming content creators rather than just consumers. So what this means is that you can't just present media on one platform. You've really got to think of it as a fragmented strategy across multiple platforms, because you're talking to more audiences in different ways who have different interests.
Walk us through some of your projects wherein you have applied these concepts.
So I do a lot of independent consultancy. So I work with quite a lot of indie filmmakers, where if they've written a script, or some have also written, documentaries, the question is always, how can you make this a multi-platform story world? How can you really take their ideas, the core of their ideas, and make them resonate with as wide an audience as possible? Over and above that, I do a lot of consultancy with bigger organizations. A lot of corporates these days are very interested in narrative and storytelling and how that can apply to their brands and really create more engagement with their audiences. So I work on that level. Third, companies like the BBC, some of the bigger broadcasters are very interested in how they can incorporate interactive content in what they do. So I work on a strategic level with organizations like this to really help them understand how they can come up with a strategic blueprint for implementing interactive strategy. Lastly, but for me the most important, is I write my own project. So the project that I'm working on at the moment, which takes up my time and a lot of my interest, is how we can take something like forced marriages and honor killings and use education and entertainment via interactive storytelling instead of politics and propaganda to create real-world social change. So my mission is to eradicate forced marriages and honor killings, but I want to do this in a way that is as engaging as possible and create as much awareness as possible. So the Honor Crimes project there's a working title of Searching. So we wrote a script. The script was based around a family, but also on the other side there's an organization that exists in reality, which go out as part of the forced marriage unit in the UK, and they go out to rescue back British nationals who've been kidnapped by their own family. So my film was about a family on one level, but the political response to these kinds of situations on a more macro level. We wrote a script about that, and we were lucky enough to be finalists at the Sundance New Frontier Story Lab. And since then I've been working to elaborate the idea across lots of other platforms based on a strategic approach that relies on talking and creating with audiences and really listening to what people are talking about, and use that information, that data almost, and feed it back into the creative storytelling process. One of the biggest issues with this project has been to understand that there are a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ways that people are thinking about it, and especially where these situations, these things occur, the honor killings actually occur, the honor crimes. In those areas themselves, that's where the most work needs to be done. So my answer to your question is threefold. Firstly, this is very much about awareness. So we're not using this project as a way to go into places like India, Pakistan, East Africa to create the change via this project. What this project is trying to do is to raise awareness in and around other parts of the world to say, look, this is actually happening. What does it mean that these things are happening? Is there a solution that we can come up with to really make that change? Second, a lot of the pieces that are made are very female focused. And rightly so. I mean, they're about the victimization of women in these situations. Now, we're very aware of that, but one thing that the project is trying to do is to address the fact that we're trying to get to a sort of curative approach, a curative consensus rather than a preventative one. And by that, we're more interested in learning about what honour really means in these societies, and also what the male point of view is for this project. So why do men predominantly commit these crimes? In families, why is it so male focused? And of the people who commit these crimes, what was the psychological underpinnings for why and how they did it? So that's our focus, and we feel that that conversation will lead to a more balanced answer to what's happening and people's attitudes. And thirdly and lastly, a lot of these documentaries, especially like India's Daughter, they always have, like any story, have an angle, an approach, and so forth. My story, or the story world we're trying to create, is very much about, yes, getting other people's opinions, but we're not trying to find a democratic sort of consensus and just a balanced view. I have a take. I believe this is wrong and it should be eradicated. So what I'm trying to understand from that core question of what honour really means in these societies is really trying to gauge opinion on a global level about where the conversation is at, and use that as part of my storytelling.